The chain rattled. That's what Elijah Hawthorne heard first when he stepped into Silas Keller's barn that October morning in 1876. Not the sound of horses shifting in their stalls, not the creak of old wood settling, the metallic scrape of iron against iron, and then silence so heavy it had weight. He'd ridden 3 days through Montana territory to buy a horse. What he found instead was a woman who'd forgotten what kindness looked like, chained to a support beam like livestock, her wrists raw and bleeding, her eyes emptied of everything except the faint flickering will to survive one more day. Some purchases cost more than money. Some cost your peace. Some cost your soul if you walk away. But before we begin, if you believe some chains need breaking and some silences need shattering, subscribe to this channel right now. This story gets darker before the dawn breaks, and I need you here till the end. Drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far truth can travel. Now let's go back to that barn. Back to the moment everything changed. Elijah Hawthorne had stopped trusting easy smiles around the time he buried his wife and daughter in the same grave outside Chattanooga. That was 1864. 12 years gone now, but some holes in a man never fill up. They just grow quieter. He was 36 years old and looked 50. The war did that. 4 years as a field surgeon for the Union Army, trying to save boys whose bodies had been opened up by minié balls and cannonballs and shrapnel that turned human beings into puzzles with missing pieces. He'd gotten good at amputations. Real good. Fast hands, steady nerves, cold focus. But speed didn't matter when it was cholera. When it was your own family. When the medicine ran out, and all you could do was hold their hands and lie to them about tomorrow. After the war ended, Eli drifted west. Couldn't stand Tennessee anymore. Couldn't stand the graveyards or the memories or the way people looked at him like he should have saved more, should have saved better, should have saved the ones that mattered. He bought land up in Montana territory near the Bitterroot Range, built a small cabin with his own hands, ran a few cattle, kept some chickens, lived alone, spoke to people maybe twice a month when he rode into Bitter Creek for supplies. The silence up there suited him. Mountains didn't ask questions. Rivers didn't judge. But now his mare had gone lame, and a man without a horse in Montana might as well be a fish without water. Word came through the general store that Silas Keller, a rancher south of Bitter Creek, was selling off stock. Had a good sorrel mare, young and strong. So Eli saddled up his gelding and rode south for 3 days through country that got lonelier the farther you went. Passed maybe 2 homesteads the whole way. Saw more elk than people. The land out here had a way of swallowing folks whole if they weren't careful. By the time Eli reached Keller's property on October 14th, the sun sat low and pale in a white sky. Autumn in Montana meant the air turned sharp enough to bite, and the grass had gone the color of old bones. The Keller Ranch sprawled across a valley between 2 ridges. Big operation. Maybe 300 head of cattle, good grazing land, a main house built from milled lumber instead of logs, rare out here. Corrals, outbuildings, a smokehouse, a root cellar. Money lived here. Real money. But something felt wrong. Eli couldn't name it at first. Just a feeling in his gut, the same instinct that used to warn him when a soldier's wound had gone septic even before the smell hit. He rode up the main path, slow, taking it all in. No smoke from the chimney, even though October mornings were cold enough to frost. No dogs running out to bark. No ranch hands visible anywhere, though it was just past dawn prime working hours. The corrals held horses, but they stood listless, heads low. And the chickens. They wandered the yard in aimless circles, clucking soft and confused, like they'd forgotten what chickens were supposed to do. The whole place felt like a held breath. Eli dismounted near the porch and tied his gelding to the rail. His hand drifted to the Colt 45 on his hip, then away. Paranoia was one thing. Rudeness was another. He knocked. No answer. Knocked again, harder. The door swung open, and Silas Keller stood there filling the frame. First impression prosperous. Second impression wrong. Keller was a big man, maybe 50 years old, with silver threading through dark hair, slicked back with pomade. Expensive clothes, pressed trousers, a vest with a gold watch chain, polished boots. His face was broad and clean-shaven, the kind of face that smiled easy at church socials and town meetings. But his eyes didn't match the smile. His eyes were flat, empty, like looking into a frozen pond. "You'd be Hawthorne," Keller said. His voice was smooth, educated, not the rough drawl of most ranchers out here. "I am. You're here about the mare. If she's still available." "She is." Keller stepped out onto the porch, pulling the door shut behind him. Fast, like he didn't want Eli seeing inside. "Fine animal. 4 years old, good bloodlines. She'll carry you 20 miles without complaint." "I'd like to see her." Of course. She's in the barn." Keller gestured toward the large structure across the yard. "Go on ahead. I'll fetch the ownership papers." He turned back toward the house, then paused. "Oh, and Hawthorne. Don't go wandering. Property's got hazards. Bear traps along the northern fence line. Wouldn't want you stepping wrong." The way he said it made Eli's jaw tighten. "Understood." Keller disappeared inside. The door clicked shut, loud, final. Eli stood there a moment listening. Heard nothing from inside the house. No movement, no voices, nothing. He turned and walked toward the barn boots crunching on gravel. The feeling in his gut got worse with every step. Chapter 2. The Barn. The barn doors were closed but not latched. Eli pushed one open and the hinges screamed like something dying. The smell hit him immediately. Hay, manure, leather, all normal. But underneath something else. Something organic and wrong. The copper salt smell of old blood mixed with infection. Eli had smelled it 1,000 times during the war in field hospitals, where gangrene and sepsis killed more men than bullets. His hand went to his gun, loosening it in the holster. Inside the barn was dim. Sunlight leaked through gaps in the roof planks, throwing pale stripes across the dirt floor. Dust floated in the light like ash. 6 stalls lined the left wall. The sorrel mare stood in the farthest one, ears pricked forward, watching him. She was a beauty, reddish-brown coat, white blaze, strong legs. Worth the 3-day ride. But Eli didn't move toward her. Because on the right side of the barn, partially hidden behind a stack of hay bales and old tack, was a shape that didn't belong. Human, small, crumpled. Eli's breath caught. He crossed the barn floor in 4 long strides, his boots silent, now instinct taking over. When he rounded the hay bales, his whole body went cold. A woman lay on her side in the dirt, wrists chained to a support beam. She wore what had once been a dress calico print, now torn and filthy beyond recognition. Her hair hung in matted tangles around her face. Her skin was mottled with bruises in every color. Fresh purple healing, yellow-green, old brown. A scab ran from her temple to her cheekbone, crusted and weeping at the edges. But it was her wrists that made Eli's stomach turn. The iron cuffs had rubbed the skin raw down to the muscle in places. Dried blood crusted the metal. Fresh blood seeped where the scabs had cracked. She was awake. Her eyes, one swollen nearly shut, the other wide and glassy with fever, tracked his movement. She didn't speak, didn't scream, didn't beg. She just watched him like a trapped animal that had stopped expecting rescue. "Jesus Christ," Eli whispered. He dropped to one knee beside her, hands hovering, unsure where to touch without causing more pain. "Ma'am," he said quietly, voice steady, despite the rage building in his chest. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" Her lips moved. No sound came out. "I'm going to help you. You understand, I'm going to get you out of here." Her eye, the one that could fully open, blinked. Once. That was all. Eli examined the chains. Heavy iron, old but solid. Secured to the beam with a padlock. He'd need a key or a hacksaw. Neither of which he had. "How long?" he asked gently. "How long have you been here?" She opened her mouth. Her voice came out cracked, barely a whisper, like something broken that used to sing. Don't. No. Long time. Long, long time. Fever, Eli thought immediately. Infection, dehydration, malnutrition. She was dying slow. I'm going to get water, and I'm going to get these chains off. Don't move. He stopped himself. Stupid thing to say. She couldn't move. He stood and turned toward the barn door and found Silas Keller standing there blocking the light. Chapter 3. The Monster Speaks. Keller held no weapon. Didn't need to. He was a big man, well-fed and strong, and he stood between Eli and the only exit. But Eli had spent 4 years in war. He knew how to read danger, and Keller was dangerous. Found her, did you? Keller's voice was calm. Pleasant even, like they were discussing weather. Eli's hand rested on his gun. What is this? That, Keller said, nodding toward the woman, is Abigail Morgan. She came wandering onto my property 6 months ago, half dead from exposure. No horse, no supplies, no explanation. I took her in, fed her, gave her shelter. You chained her. I secured her. Keller stepped into the barn, letting the door creak shut behind him. She's wild, Hawthorne. Dangerous. Tried to stab my boy Jacob with a kitchen knife the first week. Nearly succeeded. I couldn't have her running loose threatening my family. Eli's voice went low, deadly calm. Your family. Where are they? Jacob's in town. My wife passed years ago. It's just us here. No ranch hands. I let them go. Couldn't afford the wages anymore. Keller smiled, but it never reached his eyes. Times are hard, you understand. Eli understood plenty. Understood that this man was lying. Understood that Abigail Morgan hadn't wandered onto this property. She'd been taken, or bought, or stolen. You're going to give me the key to those chains? Eli said quietly. Keller laughed. Actually laughed. Or what, you'll shoot me, I'm unarmed, Hawthorne. You'd hang for murder. Self-defense. Is it? You're on my property. You came into my barn uninvited. Found my ward, and now you're making threats. Sheriff Carson's a personal friend. Who do you think he'll believe? Eli had seen this before. Men with money and connections who thought laws didn't apply to them. Men who smiled at church and beat their wives at home. Men who wore respectability like a mask. She needs a doctor, Eli said. She's got fever. Infection. She'll die if she stays here. Then she dies. Keller shrugged. Not my concern. She made her choices. Something snapped in Eli's head. He'd been trained as a healer, spent 4 years trying to save lives, even when it cost him his own humanity. Spent 12 years since then trying to forget the ones he couldn't save. He was done forgetting. Eli moved. Fast. Faster than a man his age had any right to move. He crossed the distance between them in 2 steps, his fist driving straight into Keller's jaw with all the force of 12 years of rage behind it. Keller's head snapped back. He staggered, hit the barn wall, slid down. Eli didn't stop. He grabbed Keller by the collar, dragged him upright, and hit him again. This time in the gut. Heard the air explode out of the man's lungs. Where's the key? Each word punctuated by another blow. Keller gasped, blood running from his split lip. Vest. Pocket. Eli shoved his hand into Keller's vest and found a small iron key, pulled it free. Then he dragged Keller across the barn floor and threw him face first into a pile of manure and hay. You move, I'll shoot you, Eli said flatly. And I don't miss. Keller groaned, but didn't get up. Eli turned back to Abigail. She was watching him with that one clear eye. Something had changed in it. Not hope, not yet. But maybe the faint memory of what hope used to feel like. This is going to hurt, Eli warned as he knelt beside her. He fitted the key into the padlock. It stuck, Rust and dried blood gummed up the mechanism. "Come on," he muttered, twisting harder. Behind him, he heard Keller moving, scrambling up. The lock clicked open. Eli yanked the chains free just as Keller charged. Big man, strong, desperate. But Eli had been a surgeon. Knew human anatomy better than most. Knew exactly where to strike to make it hurt, make it count, make it stop. He sidestepped Keller's rush, drove his elbow into the man's kidney, and when Keller doubled over, brought his knee up into Keller's face. Bone crunched. Keller went down hard and didn't get up this time. Eli stood over him, breathing hard, knuckles split and bleeding. "You're going to jail," Eli said quietly. "Sheriff Carson can be your friend all he wants. Federal marshals will hear about this. And when they do, you'll hang." Keller spat blood. "You don't know who you're messing with." "I know exactly who I'm messing with." Eli holstered his gun and turned away. "A dead man who just doesn't know it yet." He knelt beside Abigail again. "Can you walk?" She shook her head. Small movement, exhausted. "Then I'm going to carry you. It's going to hurt, but I need you to stay quiet. Can you do that?" She nodded. Eli slipped his arms under her, one behind her shoulders, one under her knees, and lifted. She weighed almost nothing, like lifting a child. Skin and bone and fever wrapped in rags. She made a sound small and broken when he stood. "I know," he murmured. "I know. We're almost out." He carried her past Keller, past the sorrel mare he'd ridden 3 days to buy past everything he'd come here for. Because some things mattered more than horses. Some things mattered more than money. Some things mattered more than staying out of trouble. He kicked the barn door open with his boot and stepped into cold morning sunlight. Chapter 4. The Choice. The ranch yard was still empty. No one came running. No one shouted. The silence felt enormous. Eli's gelding stood where he'd tied it, patient and steady. But one horse couldn't carry 2 people 3 days back to Bitter Creek, not with Abigail in this condition. He needed supplies, water, food, blankets, medicine if Keller had any, and he needed the sorrel. Eli carried Abigail to his gelding and gently propped her against the horse's shoulder. The animal shifted but held steady, sensing something wrong, something fragile. "Stay here," Eli said quietly. "I'll be right back." Abigail's hand, thin, trembling, reached out and caught his sleeve. "Don't leave." Her voice broke on the words. Eli covered her hand with his. "I'm not leaving you. I promise. I'm getting supplies. 2 minutes. That's all." She held his gaze for a long moment, searching for truth in his eyes. Then she let go. Eli straightened and strode toward the main house. The front door was unlocked. He pushed inside. The house smelled like tobacco and whiskey and something sour underneath. Unwashed dishes piled in the kitchen, empty bottles on the table. The whole place had the feel of a man who'd stopped caring about appearances when no one was watching. Eli moved fast, gathering what he needed: blankets from a bedroom, dried jerky and hardtack from the pantry, a canteen of water, a jar of honey good for infection, clean cloth for bandages. In Keller's bedroom, he found a leather saddlebag and stuffed everything inside. Then he saw it. On the dresser, a tintype photograph in a tarnished frame. 3 women, different faces, different ages, but same haunted expression, same hollowed eyes, and behind them, smiling like a proud father, Silas Keller. Eli's blood went cold. He picked up the frame, turned it over. Someone had written on the back in faded pencil, Sarah, 1868. Catherine, 1871. Lily, 1874. 3 names. 3 women. 3 years apart. Abigail was number 4. Eli set the frame down carefully, his hands shaking with rage, so pure it felt like ice. He'd thought this was just cruelty, just one man's sickness. But this was something worse. This was a pattern, a habit, a collection. How many had there been? How many had died in that barn? He grabbed the photograph and shoved it in the saddlebag. Evidence. Proof. Then he walked out of that house and didn't look back. Chapter 5. The Escape. Eli strapped the saddlebag to his gelding, then returned to the barn. Keller was still on the ground, conscious but dazed. He watched Eli with hate burning in his flat eyes. "You're a dead man, Hawthorne," he rasped. "I'll find you. I'll find her, and I'll make you watch what I do to her before I kill you." Eli said nothing, just walked to the sorrel's stall, opened it, and led the mare out. She came willingly, ears forward, trusting. He tied her reins to his gelding's saddle. Now he had 2 horses. He went back to Abigail, lifted her again, heard her breathe in sharp through her teeth, and carried her to the sorrel. "This is going to be rough," he said quietly. "But this mare's gentle. She'll carry you careful." He set Abigail in the saddle as gently as possible, then climbed up behind her. His arms went around her to hold the reins, keeping her steady. She leaned back against him, and he felt how hot she was through her torn dress, fever burning her up from the inside. "We need to move," he said. "We need to get distance between us and here before he recovers enough to ride after us." Abigail's voice small and cracked. "Where are we going?" "My land. Up near the Bitterroot Range. 3 days hard riding. Can you make it?" She was quiet for a long moment. Then, yes. Eli didn't believe her, but he admired the lie. He kicked the sorrel into a trot, leading his gelding behind. They left the ranch at a steady pace, fast enough to put distance behind them, slow enough not to jar Abigail too badly. As they reached the main trail, Eli heard a sound behind them. Keller, staggering out of the barn, blood covering his face, screaming words that got lost in the wind. Eli didn't look back. He just rode. Chapter 6. The first night. They made maybe 15 miles before Abigail started slipping in and out of consciousness. Eli felt her weight shift, felt her head loll forward. He tightened his arm around her waist. "Stay with me," he said quietly. "Just a little longer." No response. The sun was dropping fast, painting the mountains red and gold, temperature dropping with it. October in Montana meant frost by nightfall. Eli found a spot off the trail, sheltered by a stand of pines near a creek. Good cover. Water source. Defensible if Keller came after them tonight. He dismounted carefully, lowering Abigail to the ground. She was burning up. Eli pressed his palm to her forehead and swore quietly. Infection. Bad. He needed to clean her wounds, get fluids in her, bring the fever down. And he needed to do it all before shock set in and her body gave up. Eli worked fast, setting up camp with practiced efficiency. Small fire hidden by rocks. Bedroll laid out with blankets. Horses tethered and fed. Water boiling in a tin pot. Then he turned his attention to Abigail. She was barely conscious, eyes glassy and unfocused, shivering despite the fever. "I need to check your wounds," Eli said gently. "I'm a doctor. Was a doctor. During the war. I'm not going to hurt you more than I have to, but this is going to hurt. You understand?" She blinked slowly. Maybe understanding, maybe not. Eli took that as permission. He started with her wrists. Carefully, gently, he cleaned the raw flesh with boiled water and clean cloth. The infection had spread, red lines running up her forearms. Blood poisoning. If it reached her heart, she'd die. He packed the wounds with honey, natural antibiotic, old folk remedy that actually worked, and wrapped them in clean bandages. Then he checked the rest of her. Bruises everywhere. Cracked ribs on her left side. A deep gash on her thigh that had partially healed, but was now festering. Eli cleaned it all. Methodically, professionally, pushing down the rage that threatened to choke him every time he found another injury, another sign of prolonged suffering. When he finished, he wrapped her in blankets and held a canteen to her lips. "Drink," he ordered quietly. She tried, managed a few swallows before coughing. "Good," Eli murmured. "That's good. Rest now." He sat beside her through the night, keeping the fire low, keeping watch. Around midnight, she started shaking. Fever breaking maybe, or getting worse, hard to tell. Eli moved closer, adding his body heat to the blankets. "You're safe," he said quietly, not sure if she could hear him. "You're safe now. I won't let him take you back. I promise." She turned her face toward him, and in the firelight, he saw tears tracking through the dirt on her cheeks. "Why?" she whispered. "Why help me?" Eli was quiet for a long time, staring into the fire, remembering another woman, another time he'd been too late. "Because I couldn't help the last one," he said finally. "Because I'm tired of walking past suffering and pretending I don't see it. Because you deserve better than dying in a barn like an animal." He paused, then added softer, "Because no one should die alone." Abigail's hand, small trembling, reached out from under the blankets and found his. She held on like she was drowning. And Eli held on back. They stayed like that through the night. Two broken people keeping each other from falling apart. When dawn broke cold and pale over the mountains, they rode on. Chapter 7. Day 2. Abigail was stronger in the morning. Not strong, but stronger. She could sit upright in the saddle without Eli holding her steady, could drink water on her own, could speak in more than whispers. They rode at a walk following game trails through the foothills. Eli kept them off the main road. Keller might send men after them, might come himself. Better to stay hidden. Around mid-morning, Abigail spoke, "What's your name?" Eli glanced at her. First real question she'd asked. First sign of a person instead of just a survivor. "Elijah Hawthorne, Eli." "I'm Abigail. But you already knew that." "I did." Silence for a while. Just the sound of hooves on dirt, wind through grass. Then, "You said you were a doctor." "Was. During the war. Not anymore." "Why not?" Eli took a breath. Let it out slow. "Got tired of failing. Got tired of watching people die while I stood there holding a scalpel like it meant something." "But you helped me." "Helping one person is different than trying to save 1,000. More silence. Then Abigail said, voice steady, "He's going to come after us. Silas. He doesn't let things go. He's got friends. Men who do what he tells them. For money. I know. You should leave me. I'll slow you down. He'll catch us both." Eli reined the sorrel to a stop, turned in the saddle to look at her directly. "Listen to me. I'm not leaving you. Not for money, not for safety, not for anything. We're going to my land. We're going to get you healthy, and then we're going to figure out what comes next. Together. You understand?" Abigail stared at him, like she was seeing something she'd forgotten existed. "Why do you care?" she whispered. Eli was quiet for a moment, then, because someone should. He kicked the horse forward again. They rode until dusk, making maybe 20 miles. Found another sheltered spot near a stream. This time Abigail helped set up camp. Slowly, carefully, but she helped. Gathered kindling, filled the canteen, fed the horses, small tasks. But they meant something. Meant she was choosing to live, instead of just surviving. That night, sitting by the fire, she told him, "Not everything. Not the worst parts. But enough." "My family had a homestead near Lawrence, Kansas," she said quietly, staring into the flames. "Pa was a blacksmith. Ma kept house. I had 2 brothers. We weren't rich, but we were happy." Past tense. Eli noticed. Last spring, a group of men came through. Outlaws. They wanted supplies. Pa tried to bargain with them. She stopped. swallowed hard. They shot him, right there in the yard. Then they went inside. Her voice went flat, empty. Ma tried to fight. They killed her too. My brothers ran. I heard shots. Don't know if they made it. And you? Eli asked gently. I hid in the root cellar. Stayed there 2 days after they left. When I came out, I buried my family, burned what was left of the house. Then I just started walking. Didn't know where I was going. Didn't care. She pulled her knees up to her chest. I walked for weeks, maybe months, lost track, ran out of food, drank from streams, slept in caves. I was dying slow, and I knew it, and I didn't care because everyone I loved was already dead. How did Keller find you? Her jaw tightened. I collapsed on his land, woke up in his house. He was kind at first, fed me, let me rest, told me I could work for him to earn my keep. I was grateful. She laughed bitter and sharp. Grateful. God, I was so stupid. You were desperate. That's different. He started watching me all the time. Wouldn't let me leave the property. Said it wasn't safe, that there were outlaws in the area. I believed him. Her hands clenched into fists. Then one night he came to my room, locked the door, told me I belonged to him now, that he'd saved my life and I owed him. When I tried to fight she stopped, breathed. He dragged me to the barn, chained me up, said I needed to learn my place. How long were you there? 6 months, maybe longer. He brought food sometimes, water, enough to keep me alive. His son Jacob brought it mostly. Jacob never. He never touched me. But he never helped me either. Just left the food and walked away. Tears ran down her face, now silent and steady. I prayed someone would come. Every day. I prayed and nobody came. And then I stopped praying. Stopped believing anyone would. She looked at Eli. And then you walked into that barn. Eli met her gaze. I'm sorry it took so long. You don't need to apologize. You didn't know. Someone knew. Someone always knows. They just don't do anything. They sat in silence for a long time, listening to the fire crack and pop. Finally, Abigail said, What happens when we get to your land? You heal. You rest. You decide what you want to do next. And if Keller comes... Eli's voice went cold, flat, final. Then I'll kill him. Chapter 8. The Storm. They should have had one more day of peace. Should have made it to Eli's land without trouble. Should have. But on the morning of day 3, Eli woke to the sound of horses. Multiple horses. Coming fast. He was on his feet instantly, hand on his gun, scanning the landscape. 3 riders, maybe a quarter-mile back, following their trail. Abigail, Eli said urgently. Get up, now. She jerked awake, fear flooding her eyes. What? Riders, coming fast. We need to move. They broke camp in under 2 minutes, leaving behind anything that would slow them. Eli lifted Abigail onto the sorrel, climbed up behind her, and kicked the horse into a gallop. His gelding followed, trained to run without leading. But the men behind them were gaining. Eli pushed the horses harder than he wanted to, but they had no choice. The terrain here was open, rolling hills with sparse trees. No place to hide, no place to make a stand. Abigail clung to the saddle teeth, gritted against the pain of every jarring step. How many? She gasped. 3. Is one of them? Don't know. Could be Keller, could be hired men. A gunshot cracked behind them. The bullet went wide, kicking up dirt 10 feet to their left. They're warning us, Eli said grimly. Next one won't miss. He needed cover, needed it now. Up ahead, the land dropped into a shallow ravine, thick with scrub pine and boulders. Not ideal, but better than nothing. Hold on, he told Abigail. He drove the horses down the slope at a reckless pace. The sorrel stumbled, caught herself, kept running. They hit the bottom, and Eli hauled on the reins, bringing both horses to a plunging stop behind a cluster of boulders. He dismounted fast, pulling Abigail down with him. "Stay behind the rocks. Don't move." "What are you—" "Ending this." Eli drew his colt and moved to the edge of the boulder, peering around. The three riders had reached the top of the ravine. They sat their horses, backlit by morning sun. One of them was Silas Keller. Even at this distance, Eli recognized the man's silhouette. Big, prosperous, monstrous. The other two were younger, hired guns probably, men who'd do anything for money. Keller's voice echoed down into the ravine. "Hawthorne, send the girl back and you can ride out of here alive." Eli said nothing, just took aim. "I'm a reasonable man," Keller called. "You made a mistake. I understand that. Just give me what's mine and we'll forget this ever happened." Abigail made a sound behind Eli. Small, broken, like an animal that had been kicked too many times. Eli's finger tightened on the trigger. "She's not yours," he called back. "She's not anyone's, and you're not leaving this ravine alive." Silence. Then Keller laughed, cold and cruel. "You're one man with one gun, Hawthorne. We're three. You can't win this. Watch me." Eli fired. The shot was perfect. Clean, professional. Hit Keller's horse right in the chest. The animal went down screaming. Keller tumbled from the saddle, landed hard. The two hired guns scattered, diving for cover. Return fire came fast. 3, 4, 5 shots hammering the boulder Eli crouched behind. But Eli had fought in the war, had spent years in situations where one mistake meant death. He moved like he'd never stopped. Shifted position, came up on the other side of the boulder. Fired twice. One of the hired guns jerked and fell from his horse. The second one broke and ran, spurring his horse back up the slope. Eli let him go. One witness was fine. One witness could tell the law what happened here. That left Keller. Eli stepped out from behind the boulder gun, trained on the spot where Keller had fallen. Nothing. No movement. Then Keller rose from behind, his dead horse pistol in hand, face twisted with rage. He fired wildly 3 shots in rapid succession. One missed. One hit the boulder. One grazed Eli's shoulder, burning like a brand. Eli didn't flinch, just sighted carefully and fired. The bullet took Keller in the chest, center mass. Perfect shot. Keller staggered backward, looked down at the blood spreading across his expensive vest, looked up at Eli with something like surprise. Then he fell. Didn't get up. Eli stood there for a long moment, gun still raised, waiting to see if Keller would move again. He didn't. Behind Eli, Abigail's voice. "Is he?" "Yeah." "Are you sure?" Eli walked forward slowly, gun never wavering, reached Keller's body, pressed 2 fingers to the man's neck. No pulse. "I'm sure." He holstered his gun and turned back to Abigail. She stood by the rocks shaking, tears streaming down her face, but she wasn't crying from grief. She was crying from relief. Eli crossed to her, wrapped his arms around her as she collapsed against him. "It's over," he said quietly. "He can't hurt you anymore. It's over." She sobbed into his chest, her whole body shaking. And Eli held her, this broken woman who'd survived 6 months in hell, and let her cry until there was nothing left. When she finally pulled back, her eyes were red but clear. "Thank you," she whispered. Eli shook his head. "You don't need to thank me." "Yes, I do. You saved my life. You saved your own life. You survived. You held on. I just cut the chains." She smiled then, small and fragile but real. The first real smile Eli had seen from her. "What now?" she asked. Eli looked around the ravine, at the dead men and the dead horse and the blood soaking into dirt. Now he said, "We bury him. We take the other horse for supplies, and we go home." Home? My land. Our land if you want it to be. Abigail stared at him. You'd let me stay. Let you. Abigail, I'm asking you to stay. You need time to heal. Time to figure out who you are without chains. And He stopped, looked away. I could use the company, if you're willing. She reached out and took his hand. I'm willing. They stood there in the morning light, two people who'd found each other in the worst possible way. And for the first time in 12 years, Eli Hawthorne felt something other than grief. He felt hope. They buried Silas Keller in a shallow grave far from the trail, marking it with nothing but stones. The other hired gun, the one Eli had shot, got the same treatment. Quick, efficient, final. Eli stripped both bodies of weapons and ammunition first. Took Keller's money belt, too, nearly $300 in gold coins. Blood money maybe, but Abigail would need it for supplies for medicine for starting over. She watched him work without speaking, her face unreadable. When he finished and stood wiping dirt from his hands, she said quietly, "Shouldn't we tell someone the law?" "We will. When we get to my land, I'll ride into Bitter Creek. Report what happened. Show them the photograph I took from Keller's house, the one with the other women. There'll be questions, but the truth's on our side. You think they'll believe us?" Eli looked at her wrists, still wrapped in bandages, still seeping blood through the cloth. "Yeah, I think they will." They took Keller's horse, a big bay gelding, well-fed and strong, and loaded it with supplies from the dead men's saddlebags. Extra ammunition, dried beef, a bedroll, a hunting knife. Everything useful. Then they rode on. The land began to change as they climbed higher into the foothills. Grass gave way to pine forests. The air thinned and cooled. Snow capped the distant peaks of the Bitterroot Range, white and sharp against blue sky. Eli's shoulder throbbed where Keller's bullet had grazed him, but he ignored it. Flesh wound. He'd had worse. Would clean it and bandage it tonight when they made camp. Abigail rode the sorrel beside him now instead of in front, sitting straighter, moving with the horse instead of just clinging on. Getting stronger, healing in small, visible ways. Around midday she spoke, "Tell me about your land." Eli glanced at her. "Not much to tell. Small cabin I built myself. Maybe 40 acres of grazing land. Creek runs through the property year-round. Decent hunting in the mountains. It's quiet, remote. Nearest neighbors 10 miles away." "Sounds lonely." "It is." "Doesn't that bother you?" Eli was quiet for a moment, remembering the years after the war, the silence that had felt like punishment at first, then like mercy. "Used to," he said finally. "Not anymore. Loneliness is simpler than people. Doesn't ask questions, doesn't judge, doesn't die on you." Abigail looked at him thoughtfully. "That why you live up there? To avoid people? To avoid losing people? There's a difference." "Is there?" Eli didn't answer that. They rode in silence for a while, the only sounds the creak of leather, the soft thud of hooves on pine needles, the distant cry of a hawk circling overhead. Then Abigail said so quietly he almost missed it, "I'm glad you found me." Eli's throat tightened. "So am I. Even though it cost you, even though you had to kill a man. I've killed men before. War taught me that sometimes killing's necessary. Sometimes it's the only right thing left to do." He paused. "Keller needed killing. Been needing it for years probably. I just happened to be the one who did it. You think that's true? That some people need killing?" "I think some people forfeit their right to live when they torture others. Yeah." Abigail nodded slowly, like she was testing that idea against something inside herself. "I'm glad he's dead," she said. "I know I should feel guilty about that, should feel something other than relief, but I don't. I'm just glad. That's human. That's normal." "Is it?" Or am I broken now? Eli reined his horse to a stop, turned to face her fully. Listen to me. You're not broken. You survived something that should have killed you. You kept your mind when anyone else would have lost it. You're stronger than you know, Abigail. Don't let what he did to you make you doubt that. Her eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them away. How do you know? How do you know I'm not just damaged beyond repair? Because I've seen damaged beyond repair. Saw it in the war in field hospitals where men came in with their bodies shattered and their minds gone. Saw it in myself after my wife and daughter died. You're hurt, yeah. But hurt isn't the same as broken. Hurt can heal. And if it doesn't, then you learn to live with it, same as everyone else. She held his gaze for a long moment. Then she nodded and urged her horse forward. They reached Eli's land just before sunset. The cabin sat in a small valley tucked between two ridges, surrounded by tall pines that whispered in the wind. It was simple one-room stone fireplace, a loft for sleeping. Solid, built to last. A small barn stood nearby, along with a chicken coop and a corral for the horses. A garden plot overgrown now with autumn weeds. The creek Eli had mentioned ran clear and cold 30 yards from the cabin, catching the last light of day like liquid silver. Abigail stared at it all with something like wonder. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Eli dismounted and helped her down from the sorrel. She swayed slightly when her feet hit the ground, and he steadied her with a hand on her elbow. "Come on, let's get you inside. Get some real food in you. Get those wounds properly dressed." He led her to the cabin and pushed open the door. Inside smelled like wood smoke and coffee and leather. Simple furniture. A table, 2 chairs, a bed frame with a thin mattress. Shelves lined with books and supplies. A trunk in the corner. Clean, organized, sparse. Eli lit a fire in the stone fireplace while Abigail sank into one of the chairs, exhaustion written in every line of her body. "There's a loft upstairs," Eli said, feeding kindling to the flames. "You can sleep there. I'll take the main floor." "You don't have to." "Yes, I do. You need privacy, space, time to feel safe." He straightened and looked at her. "I'm not going to crowd you, Abigail. You've had enough of men who don't respect boundaries." She nodded slowly, gratitude and relief flickering across her face. Eli cooked that night. Simple fair beans and salt pork cornbread coffee strong enough to strip paint. But it was hot and filling, and Abigail ate like someone who'd forgotten what real food tasted like. After dinner, Eli cleaned her wounds properly for the first time in days. The infection in her wrists had improved with the honey and clean bandages, but she'd need more time before they fully healed. "You'll have scars," he said quietly as he rewrapped them. "I'm sorry for that." "Scars are fine. Scars mean I survived." When he finished, she climbed the ladder to the loft and collapsed onto the bedroll he'd laid out for her. Eli stayed below, sitting by the fire with his rifle across his lap, listening to the night sounds outside. Listening to Abigail's breathing slow and deepen as she fell into the first real sleep she'd had in 6 months. And for the first time in 12 years, Elijah Hawthorne felt like he'd done something right. The first week passed in a blur of small tasks and quiet moments. Eli rode into Bitter Creek on the second day, leaving Abigail with the rifle and strict instructions to shoot anyone who came near. She'd nodded, face grim, hand steady on the gun. In town, Eli went straight to the sheriff's office. Sheriff Carson was a lean man in his 50s with a gray mustache and eyes that had seen too much. He listened to Eli's story without interrupting, his expression darkening with every detail. When Eli finished and laid the photograph of Keller's previous victims on the desk, Carson was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "Jesus Christ. Yeah, you killed him." "I did. Self-defense. He and 2 hired guns chased us down. Shot first. I shot back. One of the hired men can verify that he ran. Might still be running." Carson picked up the photograph, studied it. "I knew Silas Keller. Everyone did. Rich man. Respected. Never heard a whisper of anything like this. Men like that are good at hiding what they are. These women. Carson tapped the photograph. You know what happened to them? Dead, I'd guess. He kept them like animals. Probably buried them on his property when they died, or when he got tired of them. Carson's jaw tightened. I'll send men to search his ranch. If we find graves, that'll settle any questions about what you did. There'll be graves. The woman Abigail Morgan, she at your place. She is. She going to press charges, testify if there's an inquiry. If she needs to, but I'd rather spare her that if possible. Carson nodded slowly. I'll do what I can, but Hawthorne, this is going to make noise. Keller had friends, business partners, men who owe him money or favors. They're not going to like hearing he's dead. Let them not like it. Doesn't change what he was. No, it doesn't. Carson stood and extended his hand. You did the right thing. Not many men would have. Eli shook his hand. Not many men have to. He bought supplies in town. Flour, sugar, salt, coffee, fabric, for new clothes for Abigail. Paid with Keller's gold coins and didn't feel an ounce of guilt about it. On his way out of town, he stopped at the general store. The owner, a widow named Mrs. Fletcher, raised an eyebrow when she saw him buying women's clothing. Got yourself a wife, Eli Hawthorne? Got a friend who needs help. Mrs. Fletcher's expression softened. The girl from Keller's ranch. Word's already spreading. Good. Let it spread. Let everyone know what he was. They will. And Eli. She leaned closer. If she needs anything, company advice, another woman to talk to you, tell her I'm here. Sometimes healing needs more than bandages. Eli nodded, throat tight. I'll tell her. When he rode back to the cabin that afternoon, he found Abigail outside feeding the chickens. She'd washed her hair in the creek. It hung damp and clean down her back, and she'd changed into one of Eli's old shirt sleeves, rolled up hem, reaching her knees. She looked up when she heard his horse and smiled. A real smile, bright and genuine. You came back. Of course I came back. I wasn't sure you would. Thought maybe you'd realize what a burden I am and just keep riding. Eli dismounted and walked to her. Listen to me. You are not a burden. You're a person who got dealt a bad hand and survived it. Don't ever think otherwise. She ducked her head, but he could see her fighting back tears. I brought you things, he said, changing the subject before the emotion got too heavy. Clothes, fabric. Mrs. Fletcher at the general store said if you need anything, you can go see her. Mrs. Fletcher. I remember her. She was kind when I was before. She's still kind. Whole town's talking about what Keller was, what he did. You're safe, Abigail. No one's coming for you. She let out a breath she seemed to have been holding for days. Thank you. The days took on a rhythm after that. Eli taught Abigail how to care for the horses, how to milk the goat he kept in the barn, how to gather eggs without spooking the hens. Small tasks, but they gave her purpose. Gave her something to focus on besides the memories. She was a quick learner. Watched everything he did with sharp attention, asked questions, practiced until she got it right. In the evenings they sat by the fire and talked. Not about the past, not often. About other things. Books they'd read. Places they'd been. Dreams they'd had before life got complicated. I wanted to be a teacher, Abigail said one night, staring into the flames. When I was young, thought I'd open a school, teach children to read and write and think for themselves. You still could. She shook her head. No. That dream died with my family. Dreams don't die. They just wait. You believe that? Eli thought about the dreams he'd had before the war, before his wife and daughter died. Dreams of a practice in a small town, of growing old surrounded by people he'd helped heal. I want to, he said finally. Maybe that's enough. 2 weeks after they arrived, Abigail woke screaming. Eli was up instantly, rifle in hand, scanning for danger. Then he heard her crying in the loft, harsh broken sobs that sounded like something tearing. He climbed the ladder slowly. Abigail, it's Eli. You're safe. You're dreaming. Wake up. She was curled in a ball, trembling eyes wide and unseeing. He's here, she gasped. He's here. He found me. He's going to... No. Eli knelt beside her, careful not to touch her without permission. He's dead. Silas Keller is dead and buried. He can't hurt you anymore. You're in my cabin. You're safe. She blinked, focusing on his face, reality slowly returning. Eli. Yeah, it's me. You had a nightmare. She pressed her hands to her face and sobbed. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I thought... Don't apologize. You've got every right to nightmares after what you went through. Does it ever stop the dreams? Eli thought about his own nightmares. The ones where he heard his daughter calling for him, where he watched his wife die over and over, where he amputated the wrong limbs and men bled out in his hands. They get quieter, he said honestly. Not gone, but quieter. She nodded, wiping her eyes. Will you stay just until I fall back asleep? Yeah, I'll stay. He sat against the wall, rifle across his lap, and watched her breathe until she drifted off again. Then he stayed longer, just to be sure. 3 weeks, and Abigail asked if she could learn to shoot properly. Not just target practice, she said. Real shooting. How to defend myself if someone comes. Eli studied her face, saw determination there, saw strength building where fear used to live. All right, we'll start tomorrow. They spent hours each day out past the creek where the sound wouldn't carry far. Eli taught her how to hold the pistol, how to breathe, how to squeeze the trigger instead of jerking it. Don't aim for the chest, he said. If you're in a situation where you need to shoot, you aim for center mass and you don't stop until the threat's down. Understand? Yes. And Abigail, if you draw that gun, you better be ready to use it. Don't pull it to scare someone. Pull it to end the threat. She met his eyes. I can do that. I know you can. By the end of the month, she could hit a target at 30 yards. By the end of the second month, she was faster on the draw than most men Eli had met. You're a natural, he said one afternoon, watching her reload with practiced efficiency. Or I'm motivated. She holstered the gun. No one's ever putting chains on me again. No one's ever making me helpless again. Good. That's the right way to think. Winter came early that year. Snow fell in November, blanketing the valley in white silence. The creek froze at the edges. The chickens huddled in their coop. Eli and Abigail worked together to winterize the cabin ceiling gaps, stacking firewood, preserving the last of the garden vegetables. They fell into an easy partnership. Eli hunted and chopped wood. Abigail cooked and mended clothes and kept the cabin warm. They took meals together, worked together, sat by the fire together in the evenings. It felt almost like a family. Eli tried not to think about that too much. Tried not to let himself want something that might not be real, that might just be two lonely people seeking comfort in proximity. But sometimes when Abigail laughed at something he said, or when she smiled at him across the dinner table, he felt something shift in his chest. Something that had been frozen for 12 years starting to thaw. One night in December, during a particularly fierce snowstorm, Abigail came down from the loft and stood by the fire wrapped in a blanket. Can't sleep? Eli asked from his bedroll. Too cold up there, and too quiet. You can stay down here if you want. I'll give you the bed. No, I mean, can I just sit with you for a while? Eli sat up. Yeah, of course. She settled beside him close enough that he could feel her warmth, far enough that they weren't touching. They watched the fire in silence for a long time. Then Abigail said, I think I'm starting to heal. Yeah, not all the way. Maybe never all the way, but I can breathe again without feeling like I'm drowning. Can sleep some nights without nightmares. Can look at chains and locks without panicking. She paused. That's because of you. It's because of you. You did the work. I just gave you a safe place to do it. That's more than anyone else gave me." She turned to look at him, and in the firelight her eyes were clear and steady. "Eli, I don't know how to thank you. Don't know if there are words big enough." "You don't need to thank me." "Yes, I do. You saved my life, gave me back my future, gave me a reason to believe people can be good." Eli's throat tightened. "I'm not good, Abigail. I'm just a man who made one decent choice. One decent choice when it mattered most." She reached out and took his hand. Hers was warm, calloused from work strong. That's more than most people manage their whole lives. They sat like that, hands clasped, watching the fire burn down to embers. And Eli realized something he'd been trying not to admit for weeks. He was falling in love with her. Not because she needed him, not out of pity or obligation, but because she was brave and smart and fierce and kind, despite everything she'd survived. Because she made him laugh, made him want to wake up in the morning, made him believe that maybe, just maybe, he deserved a second chance at happiness. But he didn't say any of that, because she was still healing, still rebuilding herself. And the last thing she needed was pressure from the man who'd saved her, the man she might feel obligated to. So he kept quiet and held her hand and let the moment be what it was. Nothing more, nothing less. In January, a rider came. Eli saw him from a distance, single man on a gray horse moving slow up the valley trail. Not threatening, but not familiar either. "Stay inside," he told Abigail. "Keep the rifle ready." She nodded, face calm, hand steady. She'd come a long way from the terrified woman in the barn. Eli walked out to meet the rider halfway. The man was young, maybe 20, with dark hair and hollow eyes. He wore decent clothes, but looked like he hadn't slept in days. When he got close enough, Eli recognized him. Jacob Keller, Silas's son. Eli's hand went to his gun. Jacob saw the movement and raised both hands, showing they were empty. "I'm not here to fight." "Then why are you here?" "To apologize." Jacob dismounted slowly, keeping his hands visible. "To tell the truth. To make things right if I can. You stood by while your father tortured Abigail for 6 months. There's no making that right." "I know." Jacob's voice broke. "I know, and I hate myself for it, every day, every night. I hear her screaming and I did nothing." "So why come now your father's dead? You're free." "Because she deserves to hear it from me. Deserves to know I'm sorry. Deserves—" He stopped, swallowed hard. "Deserves to know the truth about what he did. All of it." Eli studied him. Saw genuine remorse there, genuine shame. "Wait here," Eli said finally. "I'll ask if she wants to see you." He walked back to the cabin. Abigail stood in the doorway, rifle lowered but ready. "That's Jacob," she said flatly. "Yeah. What does he want?" "To apologize, to tell you the truth about his father." "I already know the truth. He says there's more." Abigail was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Let him come, but you stay with me. I'm not going anywhere." They sat at the table inside the cabin, Eli and Abigail on one side, Jacob on the other. The fire crackled. Outside, snow began to fall again. Jacob looked at Abigail and his face crumpled. "I'm sorry. God, I'm so sorry. I should have helped you. Should have let you go. Should have killed him myself." "Why didn't you?" Abigail's voice was cold, controlled. "Because I was a coward. Because he was my father and I was afraid of him. Because I told myself it wasn't my responsibility, that you'd be fine, that he'd let you go eventually." Jacob's hands shook. "I lied to myself every day, and every day you suffered because I was too weak to do the right thing. You brought me food, water. You kept me alive." "Barely. And only because if you died, he'd have to explain it. I wasn't being kind. I was covering for him." Abigail's jaw tightened. "So why tell me this now?" "Because you deserve the truth. And because there's something else you need to know. Eli leaned forward. What? Jacob pulled a folded paper from his coat. Hands shaking, he laid it on the table. After my father died, I searched the ranch. Found this hidden in his office. It's a ledger. Names, dates, amounts of money. Abigail reached for it, but her hands were shaking too badly. Eli took it instead, unfolded it, scanned the contents. His blood went cold. What is it? Abigail asked. Eli's voice came out rough. It's a record. Women he bought. Women he took. Women he killed. He looked at Jacob. How many? 12, over 20 years. Abigail was number 12. The room went silent, except for the fire. 12 women. 12 lives destroyed. Abigail's face had gone white. Where are they? Buried on the property. I found the graves after the sheriff came. They're digging them up now. Identifying bodies. Trying to notify families. Jacob's voice broke. I didn't know. I swear to God I didn't know it had been that many. That long. I thought you were the first. But you knew about me, Abigail said. You knew what he was doing to me. Yes. And you did nothing. Yes. She stood abruptly, walked to the window, stared out at the falling snow. Eli watched her shoulders shake, watched her hands clench into fists. Then she turned back. Her face was composed, hard, final. Get out, she said quietly. Jacob stood. Abigail, get out. You don't get to apologize. You don't get to clear your conscience by telling me you're sorry. You had 6 months to help me. 6 months to be brave. You chose to be a coward instead. Now, live with that. Jacob's face crumpled, but he nodded. I will. For the rest of my life I will. He walked to the door, paused. For what it's worth, I'm glad you survived. Glad he's dead. Glad you found someone who did the right thing. Then he left. Eli and Abigail stood in silence for a long time after the sound of hoofbeats faded. Then Abigail said, voice shaking, 12. There were 12 of us. Yeah. I wasn't special, wasn't chosen. I was just next. You survived. That makes you special. She turned to him, tears streaming down her face. What about the others? What about the women who didn't survive? They matter too. Their families will know what happened now. We'll have closure. Justice. Justice. He's dead, and they're still dead. Where's the justice in that? Eli crossed to her, pulled her into his arms, let her sob into his chest. There isn't enough justice in the world for what he did. Eli said quietly, but he's gone. He can't hurt anyone else. That's something. It's not enough. No, it's not. They stood like that until the fire burned low and the snow piled high outside and the world felt very small and very cold. But they stood together. And that was something too. The ledger sat on the table for 3 days before Abigail touched it again. Eli watched her circle it like a wounded animal approaching something dangerous. She'd stand near the table, hands hovering over the worn leather cover, then pull back and walk away. Pour coffee she didn't drink. Stare out the window at nothing. On the 3rd night, she finally opened it. Eli was cleaning his rifle by the fire when he heard the pages rustle. Looked up and saw her bent over the ledger face, illuminated by candlelight fingers, tracing the names written in Silas Keller's precise hand. Sarah Mathers, age 19, purchased from her stepfather for $40, kept 14 months, died of pneumonia. Catherine Walsh, age 23, found wandering near Bozeman, kept 9 months, died of infection. Lily Chen, age 17, bought from a brothel in Virginia City, kept 11 months, cause of death unlisted. On and on. 12 names. 12 lives reduced to ledger entries like livestock. He wrote it all down, Abigail said, voice hollow. Like he was proud of it, like it was an accomplishment. Eli set down the rifle and crossed to her. Some men need to document their cruelty. Makes it feel real to them. Important. I survived longer than most of them. She looked up at him, eyes red. 6 months, and I was still alive. Why? What made me different? Maybe nothing. Maybe you were just stronger. Maybe you got lucky. Maybe I showed up before he got bored. Lucky? She laughed, bitter and sharp. Is that what I am? Lucky. You're alive. In my book, that counts. She turned the page. More names, more dates, more deaths. Then she stopped. Her whole body went rigid. Eli. Something in her voice made his blood run cold. What? Look. She pointed to an entry near the bottom of the page. Eli leaned over her shoulder and read Mary Hawthorne. Age 28, traveling alone from Chattanooga, took near Missoula, kept 3 months, died resisting. The world tilted sideways. Eli's hands gripped the edge of the table hard enough to make the wood creak. His vision tunneled. His breath came in short, sharp gasps. Eli. Abigail's voice sounded distant underwater. Eli, who is Mary Hawthorne. He couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, couldn't think past the roaring in his ears. Mary Hawthorne, his wife, his Mary, who died of cholera in Tennessee in 1864. Except she hadn't. She'd died here, in Montana, in Silas Keller's barn. 3 years after Eli thought he'd buried her. Eli, you're scaring me. Talk to me. He forced words out through a throat that felt like it was closing. My wife. That's my wife. Abigail's face went white. What? Mary Hawthorne. That's my wife. She died in 1864. Cholera. I buried her and our daughter in Tennessee. His voice cracked. Except I didn't. I buried our daughter. Mary. Mary survived. Are you sure it could be a different... How many Mary Hawthorns do you think were traveling alone from Chattanooga? He pushed away from the table, pacing hands, shaking. She was alive. She survived the cholera. She came looking for me, and that monster took her, and I never knew. Never looked. Never... His legs gave out. He sat down hard on the floor, back against the wall, head in his hands. Abigail knelt beside him. Eli, you couldn't have known. I should have known. Should have felt it. Should have looked harder. Searched longer. She was alive and suffering, and I was... He stopped. The truth was too ugly. I was relieved. Relieved that she died because it meant I didn't have to watch her suffer anymore. Didn't have to fail at saving her. You didn't fail her. I did. I failed her twice. Once when I stopped looking. Once when I let myself believe she was gone. You thought she was dead. Everyone did. That's not failure, it's exactly failure. He looked up at Abigail, eyes burning. She died in that barn calling for me. Died thinking I'd abandoned her. Died alone and terrified while I was living up here in the mountains pretending the past didn't exist. Abigail grabbed his face in both hands, forcing him to look at her. Listen to me. You did not kill your wife. Silas Keller killed your wife. You didn't know. Couldn't have known. And you saved me. You broke the pattern. You made sure I didn't end up another name in that ledger. But Mary is gone. Has been gone for years. You can't save her. You can only save the people who are still here, still breathing, still fighting. Her voice softened. You saved me, Eli. Don't let his evil poison that. He stared at her. This woman who'd survived hell, who'd been chained and beaten and broken and still found the strength to comfort him. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm so sorry. For what? For not being there. For all of you. For every woman he took. For being too late. You weren't too late for me. She pulled him into a fierce embrace. You were exactly on time. They stayed like that for a long time. Two people holding each other against the weight of grief too heavy for one person to carry alone. When Eli finally pulled back, his face was wet, but his eyes were clear. I need to see Sheriff Carson. Need to tell him about Mary. Need to make sure she gets a proper burial. A marker with her real name. I'll come with you. You don't have to. Yes, I do. You came with me through my hell. I'm coming with you through yours. They rode into Bitter Creek the next morning. The town was bigger than Eli remembered. More buildings, more people. Progress creeping in even here at the edge of civilization. Sheriff Carson's office sat on Main Street, a squat building with barred windows and a sagging porch. Eli tied the horses out front and helped Abigail down. She'd worn one of the dresses he'd bought her, simple blue calico, hemmed to fit and pinned her hair back. Looked respectable. Strong. Carson was at his desk reviewing papers. He looked up when they entered and stood immediately. Hawthorne, Miss Morgan. He nodded to them both. Didn't expect to see you till spring. Found something in Keller's ledger. Something you need to know about. Eli laid the ledger on the desk open to the page with Mary's name. Carson read it. His face went gray. Jesus, Eli. I'm sorry. I need to know which grave is hers. Need to make sure she's buried properly, with her name. We've been working on identifying the remains. It's slow going, most of the bodies are just bones now. But we have a woman from the right time period. Age fits. We'll do what we can to confirm. I want to see her. The gravesite. Carson hesitated. Eli, I don't know if that's... I want to see her. The sheriff nodded slowly. All right. I'll take you out there tomorrow. But Eli, it's bad. Real bad. You need to prepare yourself. I've seen bad before. Not like this. They spent the night at Mrs. Fletcher's boarding house. She fussed over Abigail like a mother hen, bringing tea and fresh bread and asking gentle questions about how she was healing. You look stronger than when I saw you last, Mrs. Fletcher said, pouring more tea. Got some color back in your cheeks. Eli's been taking good care of me. Mrs. Fletcher glanced at Eli, who sat by the window staring at nothing. And who's taking care of him? I'm trying to. Good. That man's been alone too long. Needs someone to remind him he's still human. That night, Eli lay awake in his room staring at the ceiling, thinking about Mary. Trying to remember her face, her laugh, the way she'd hum while cooking breakfast. But 12 years had blurred the details. All he could see now was the ledger entry. The cold documentation of her death. A soft knock on the door broke his thoughts. It's me. Abigail's voice came through the wood. Come in. She slipped inside, wrapped in a shawl, hair loose around her shoulders. Couldn't sleep. Me neither. She sat on the edge of his bed. Tell me about her. About Mary. Eli was quiet for a long moment. Then, we met in Nashville. I was in medical school. She was a seamstress. Smart, stubborn, laughed at my terrible jokes. He smiled despite himself. She saw me trying to stitch up a practice dummy and told me my technique was all wrong. Showed me how to do it properly. Said if I was going to be a doctor, I better learn to sew like someone who cared. Sounds like she kept you humble. She kept me human. When the war started and I enlisted as a surgeon, she begged me not to go. Said the army didn't need me as much as she did. But I went anyway. Thought I was doing something noble, something important. He shook his head. I was a fool. You were trying to help people. I was running away from a quiet life, from responsibility, from becoming the man she needed me to be. And when I came back and found her dying of cholera, it felt like punishment, like God saying, you wanted to save strangers, fine, but you don't get to save the ones you love. Abigail took his hand. That's not how it works. Isn't it every person I've ever loved has died? My parents when I was young, My daughter, Mary, everyone. Not everyone. She squeezed his hand. I'm still here. He looked at her. Really looked. Saw the strength that had grown in her over these months. Saw the woman she'd become despite everything Keller had done to break her. Yeah, he said quietly. You are. And I'm not going anywhere. You understand. Whatever happens tomorrow, whatever you find at that gravesite, I'm with you. Something tight in Eli's chest loosened. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just don't shut me out. Don't carry this alone. I don't know how to do anything else. Then learn. She stood, leaned down, and kissed his forehead. Gentle, chaste. Start learning. She left before he could respond. Eli lay back down and stared at the ceiling until dawn. Sheriff Carson rode out with them the next morning along with a deputy named Miller. They headed south from Bitter Creek, following the trail Eli had ridden months ago when he'd first gone to buy a horse. The Keller ranch looked different now. Empty. Abandoned. The main house stood with windows broken and door hanging open. The barn had partially collapsed under winter snow. The whole place felt haunted. We've impounded the property, Carson said as they dismounted. Looking for next of kin, but so far just the son. Jacob signed over ownership to the territory. Said he wanted nothing to do with it. Smart kid, Miller muttered. They walked past the barn. Eli refused to look inside and followed Carson around to the back of the property. A stand of cottonwoods marked a small hollow. Fresh-turned earth showed where graves had been excavated. 12 rectangular holes in the ground. 12 lives dug up and exposed to daylight. We've moved the remains to the undertaker in town, Carson said quietly. Trying to identify them, notify families. So far we've matched 4 names from the ledger to bodies. The rest? He shook his head. We're doing our best. Which one was Mary? Eli's voice came out rough. Carson consulted a paper. 3rd grave from the left. Based on time of death in the ledger and condition of remains, we're fairly confident. Eli walked to the grave and stood at its edge. Just a hole in the ground now. No body. No evidence of the woman who'd been buried there. But he felt her. Felt the weight of her absence. Felt the years she'd lost, the suffering she'd endured, the hope she must have held that someone would come for her. She died alone, he said. Thinking I'd abandoned her. Abigail stepped beside him. You don't know what she thought. Maybe she knew you'd have come if you could. Maybe she forgave you before she died. Or maybe she hated me. Then let that be her choice. Don't make it for her. Eli knelt at the edge of the grave, scooped up a handful of cold earth, and let it sift through his fingers. I'm sorry, Mary, he whispered. I'm sorry I wasn't there. Sorry I stopped looking. Sorry I failed you. His voice broke. I hope wherever you are, you're at peace. I hope you know I loved you. Always did. Always will. He stood and turned to Carson. I want her remains moved to Bitter Creek. Want a proper grave with a proper marker. I'll pay for it. Consider it done. And I want the other women moved too. All of them. They deserve better than being buried on his land. Carson nodded. Already planned on it. We'll put them in the town cemetery. Mark each grave with their names. Make sure people remember. Good. They stood in silence for a moment. Then Miller spoke up, voice uncertain. Mr. Hawthorne, there's something else you should know. Eli turned. What? When we excavated the graves we found items, buried with the bodies, personal effects, things Keller must have taken from them. He pulled a small cloth bundle from his coat. This was with the woman we think is your wife. He held it out. Eli took it with shaking hands, unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a locket. Silver tarnished but intact. He knew it immediately. He'd given it to Mary on their wedding day. He opened it with trembling fingers. 2 faces stared up at him from faded photographs. His own young and hopeful. And beside it, a little girl with dark curls and bright eyes. Their daughter, Emma. the daughter who'd died of cholera, the daughter he'd buried in Tennessee. Mary had carried this locket across half the country, had kept it through captivity and suffering, had died with the faces of her family pressed against her heart. Eli's knees buckled. Abigail caught him before he hit the ground, wrapped her arms around him as he broke. He sobbed like a child. 12 years of grief pouring out all at once. Grief for Mary, for Emma, for the life they'd almost had, for all the what-ifs and might-have-beens that death had stolen. Abigail held him through it all. Didn't tell him to be strong. Didn't tell him it would be okay. Just held him and let him grieve. When he finally pulled back, face wet and eyes swollen, she said, "She kept them with her. She never stopped loving you." "I know." He closed the locket carefully. "That's what makes it worse." They buried Mary Hawthorne in Bitter Creek Cemetery on a cold February morning. Eli paid for a marble headstone, expensive, but worth it, with her name and dates carved deep. Mary Elizabeth Hawthorne, born 1836, died 1867. Beloved wife and mother. Pastor Williams from the church said words over the grave, called Mary a victim of evil, but a testament to endurance. Said she was with God now, at peace beyond suffering. Eli wanted to believe it. Tried to believe it. The whole town turned out. People who'd never met Mary, but came anyway because they knew what Keller had done. Because they wanted to bear witness. Because silence in the face of evil was its own kind of sin. Mrs. Fletcher brought flowers. Sheriff Carson stood hat in hand, respectful and solemn. Even Jacob Keller showed up, standing far back from the crowd, shoulders hunched with shame. When it was over and the crowd dispersed, Eli stood alone by the grave. Abigail gave him space. Waited by the horses, knowing he needed this moment alone with his wife. "I'm doing better now," Eli said quietly to the headstone. "Found a reason to keep going, to stop hiding. Her name's Abigail. She's strong, brave. Survived the same hell you did, except she made it out alive." He paused. "I think you'd like her. I think you'd want me to be happy. At least I hope you would." The wind blew cold across the cemetery, making the bare trees creak. "I'm going to live now, Mary. Really live. Not just exist. Not just survive. I'm going to be the man you thought I could be. The man I should have been for you." He touched the cold marble. "Rest now. You've earned it." Then he turned and walked away. Not running from the past, just walking toward the future. Abigail met him at the horses. "You all right?" "No, but I will be." That's all anyone can ask. They rode back to the cabin in comfortable silence. That night, Eli opened the locket one last time. Looked at Mary's face, at Emma's smile. Let himself remember without drowning in it. Then he closed it gently and put it in his trunk with his other keepsakes. Not forgotten. Never forgotten. But not the only thing he carried anymore. March came with a thaw. Snow melted into rushing streams. The creek behind the cabin ran high and fast. Green things started pushing up through dead grass. The world waking up after a long, cold sleep. Abigail had been with Eli for 5 months now. The wounds on her wrists had healed into pale scars. Her hair had grown past her shoulders. Her nightmares came less frequently. She'd taken over most of the household work, not because Eli asked, but because she wanted purpose, wanted to contribute, wanted to build something instead of just surviving. She planted a garden, repaired the chicken coop, learned to make bread from Mrs. Fletcher, started reading the books on Eli's shelves, medical texts mostly, but also poetry and philosophy and novels. She was becoming herself again, or maybe becoming someone new, someone forged by fire and made stronger for it. One evening in late March, they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and red. "I've been thinking," Abigail said, about what happens next, about whether I stay here or move on." Eli's chest tightened, but he kept his voice neutral. "You're welcome to stay as long as you want. No pressure either way." I know. That's why I can think clearly about it. Because you've never made me feel trapped. You deserve freedom. Deserve choices. She turned to look at him. What if I choose to stay? His breath caught. Then I'd be grateful. But Abigail, you need to be sure. Need to be certain you're staying because you want to, not because you feel obligated. I don't feel obligated. Then why? She was quiet for a long moment, watching the light fade, listening to the evening birdsong. Because I'm happy here. Because I wake up every morning and don't feel afraid. Because you treat me like a person instead of a broken thing. Because... She stopped, started again. Because I think I'm falling in love with you. Eli's world tilted. Abigail. I know what you're going to say. That it's too soon. That I'm confused. That I'm just grateful and mistaking it for something else. But I've had months to think about this. Months to sort through what I feel. And it's not gratitude. It's not dependence. It's love. She met his eyes. I love the way you're patient with me when I have nightmares. I love how you never push me to talk before I'm ready. I love that you're broken too, and don't pretend otherwise. I love that you saved me but never hold it over me. I love... Eli kissed her. Gentle, careful, giving her every chance to pull away. She didn't pull away. She leaned in, wrapped her arms around his neck, kissed him back like she'd been waiting months to do exactly this. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Eli rested his forehead against hers. I love you too, he whispered. Been trying not to. Been trying to give you space. But God help me. I love you. Then stop trying not to. Stop holding back. Stop treating me like I'm going to break. You've been through hell. And I came out the other side. I'm here. I'm strong. I'm choosing this. Choosing you. She cupped his face in her hands. Let me choose you, Eli. He kissed her again. Deeper this time. 12 years of loneliness pouring into it. 12 years of grief and guilt and isolation finally cracking open to let something new grow. When they pulled apart, the sun had set, and stars were emerging in the darkening sky. So you're staying, Eli said. I'm staying. For how long? Abigail smiled. How does forever sound? Sounds like more than I deserve. Good thing I'm not basing this on what you deserve. I'm basing it on what I want. And what do you want? She took his hand, laced her fingers through his. A home. A partner. A future that isn't defined by my past. Think you can give me that? I'll spend the rest of my life trying. Then that's all I need. They sat together under the stars, holding hands, two people who'd found each other in the darkest possible way and chosen to walk toward the light together. The past would always be there. The scars, physical and emotional, would never fully disappear. But they had each other now. Had tomorrow. Had hope. And sometimes that was enough. Spring turned the valley green overnight, it seemed. Wildflowers pushed through the last patches of snow. The creek ran clear and cold with snowmelt. Elk grazed in the meadow beyond the cabin, and hawks circled overhead riding thermals up toward the peaks. Eli and Abigail worked the land together like they'd been doing it for years instead of months. She weeded the garden while he repaired fences. He chopped wood while she tended the chickens. They moved around each other with an easy rhythm, two people learning to be a unit instead of just two individuals sharing space. But the peace didn't last. It was mid-April when the first letter arrived. Eli had ridden into Bitter Creek for supplies and stopped at the post office out of habit. The postmaster, an old man named Jenkins, handed him a thick envelope with a wax seal. Came from the territorial governor's office, Jenkins said, eyeing it with curiosity. Must be important. Eli thanked him and tucked the letter in his coat. Didn't open it until he was back at the cabin with Abigail sitting across from him at the table. He broke the seal and unfolded the pages. Read in silence, while Abigail watched his face grow darker with every line. What is it? She asked finally. They want me to testify. Federal marshals are building a case against men who did business with Keller. Men who knew what he was doing and looked the other way. Maybe helped him. Eli set the letter down. They need witnesses. Need people who can speak to what happened. When? Trial's set for June. In Helena. He looked at her. They want you to testify too. Abigail's face went pale. Me? You're the only survivor they can find. The only one who can tell the court firsthand what it was like. What he did. Her hands started shaking. She pressed them flat on the table to still them. I can't. I can't stand up in front of people and talk about what happened. You don't have to if you don't want to. I'll go. I'll tell them what I found in that barn, show them the ledger. That should be enough. Will it be enough to convict his associates without testimony from a victim? Eli didn't answer because they both knew the truth. Without Abigail's testimony, the case would be weaker. Men with money and lawyers would find ways to distance themselves from Keller's crimes, would claim ignorance, would walk free. Abigail stood abruptly and walked to the window, stared out at the mountains like she could find answers there. I'm not ready, she said quietly. I'm just starting to feel normal again, just starting to sleep through the night. If I have to stand in front of strangers and relive every detail. She shook her head. I don't know if I can survive that. Eli crossed to her, stood behind her without touching, giving her space. Then don't do it. Your healing matters more than their trial. Does it? What about the other women? What about making sure this never happens again? You can't save the world, Abigail. You can only save yourself. She turned to face him. You saved me. Why can't I save someone else? Because you're still healing. Because there's a difference between helping and destroying yourself in the process. Maybe destroying myself is worth it if it means those men go to prison. No. Eli's voice went hard. Nothing is worth that. Nothing. They stared at each other, the first real conflict between them hanging heavy in the air. Finally, Abigail said, I need to think about it. Take all the time you need. But time was the one thing they didn't have. The letter requested a response within 2 weeks. For days, Abigail was distant. Not cold, just lost in her own head, wrestling with something Eli couldn't help her with. She went through the motions of daily life, but her eyes were somewhere else. At night, the nightmares came back. Eli would hear her crying in the loft and climb up to sit with her, holding her hand, until she fell back into fitful sleep. I keep seeing his face, she told him one night. Keep hearing his voice. He's telling me I belong to him, that I'll never be free, that no one will believe me if I tell. He's dead. He can't hurt you anymore. But he's still in my head, still controlling me. Even dead, he's got power over me. Only if you let him. She pulled away, angry now. You think I'm letting him? You think I want to feel this way? No. I think you're human, and trauma doesn't heal on a schedule. Then how do I make it stop? How do I get him out of my head? Eli was quiet for a long moment. Then, maybe you face him. Maybe you stand up in that courtroom and say everything he did to you. Say it loud. Say it in front of everyone. Take away his power by refusing to hide. Or maybe I break completely and he wins anyway. You won't break. You're stronger than you think. How do you know? Because you've already survived the worst thing that could happen to you. Everything else is just echo. Abigail stared at him. Then she started crying, not the harsh sobs of grief, but the quiet tears of someone who's carried something heavy for too long and finally has permission to set it down. Eli held her until she fell asleep in his arms. In the morning, she made her decision. I'll testify, she said over breakfast, voice steady. But only if you're with me. Only if I can look at you when it gets too hard. I'll be right there, every second. And if I can't finish, if I break down, then we leave. No shame in that. You've already done more than anyone has a right to ask. She nodded slowly. All right, write them back. Tell them we're coming. Eli sent the reply that afternoon. The weeks leading up to the trial were tense. Abigail threw herself into work trying to stay busy, trying not to think about what was coming. She expanded the garden, repaired the barn roof, started breaking a young horse Eli had traded for. She was running, Eli realized. Running from the fear by exhausting herself. He understood it. Had done the same thing after Mary and Emma died. But running only worked until you couldn't run anymore. 2 weeks before the trial, Martha Reeves rode up to the cabin. She dismounted stiffly, her face grave. "Mrs. Reeves," Eli said, coming out to meet her. "Didn't expect to see you out this way. Got news you need to hear. Can I come in?" They settled around the table. Abigail poured coffee with shaking hands. Martha took a sip, then said, "There's talk in town. Men saying Abigail's lying about what Keller did, saying she was his mistress, not his captive, that she's only testifying now because she wants money from his estate." Abigail's cup clattered against the saucer. "That's not true. I know it's not true. Everyone with half a brain knows it's not true. But these men have been spreading the story anyway, getting people to doubt, getting them to think twice." "Who?" Eli's voice went cold. "Who's spreading this? Business associates of Keller's. Men with their own reputations to protect. They're trying to discredit Abigail before she ever sets foot in that courtroom." Eli's hands clenched into fists. "They can't do that. The evidence only matters if people believe it. If they've already decided Abigail's a liar, they won't care what evidence you show them." Abigail stood abruptly and walked outside. Eli started to follow, but Martha stopped him. "Let her have a moment. I need to tell you something else." "What?" "There's a man. Came to town last week asking questions about Abigail. Wanted to know where she was staying, what her plans were when she'd be in Helena for the trial." "What kind of man?" "The kind that gets paid to make problems disappear." Eli's blood ran cold. "You think they'd hurt her?" "I think they want her scared enough not to testify. Or worse." Martha set down her cup. "You need to be careful, Eli. These men have money and connections. They won't let a former captive ruin them without a fight. Let them try. I'll kill anyone who touches her." "I believe you would, but dead doesn't help if you're not there to protect her." Martha stood. "Watch your back, both of you, and Eli. Maybe reconsider whether this trial is worth the risk." After Martha left, Eli found Abigail sitting by the creek arms, wrapped around her knees, staring at the water. He sat beside her in silence for a while. Finally, she said, "They're trying to destroy me before I can tell the truth." "Yeah. Makes me want to testify even more. Makes me want to stand up there and tell everyone exactly what he did. What they all let him do. It also puts a target on your back. I've had a target on my back since the day Keller took me. At least now I get to shoot back." Eli looked at her, saw the steel that had grown in her over these months, saw the woman she'd become not despite the trauma, but because of how she'd chosen to face it. "All right," he said. "Then we go to Helena. We testify. We tell the truth and let the chips fall. And if they come for us, then they learn what happens when you threaten people I love." She leaned against him, and they watched the creek flow past, carrying away the last of winter. They left for Helena in early June. 3 days' ride through country that got more populated the closer they got to the territorial capital. They passed homesteads and ranches, mining camps, and small towns. Saw the way Montana was changing civilization, spreading like moss on stone. Helena itself was a revelation. After months in the wilderness, the noise and crowds felt overwhelming. Wagons rattled down dirt streets. Men in suits walked alongside miners and cowboys. The smell of coal smoke and sewage and humanity pressed in from all sides. Eli had reserved rooms at a boarding house near the courthouse, separate rooms respectable. The proprietor, a widow named Mrs. Hutchins, showed them upstairs with a knowing look that said she'd figured out their relationship and approved anyway. "Trial starts Monday," she said. "Y'all here for that business with Silas Keller?" "We are," Eli said. "Good. That man was evil wearing a respectable face. Glad someone's finally calling it what it was." She paused at Abigail's door. "You need anything, dear, you just holler. I don't hold with men who hurt women. Never have." After she left, Abigail sat on the bed and stared at her hands. 3 days, she said. 3 days until I have to talk about it. You can still change your mind. No, I can't. Not anymore. That night, Eli couldn't sleep. He sat by the window watching the street below, rifle across his lap, thinking about Martha's warning. Around midnight, he saw movement. A man standing in the shadows across the street watching their building. Eli tensed, waited. The man didn't move, just watched. After an hour, he disappeared into the darkness. Could be nothing. Could be everything. Eli stayed at the window until dawn. The first day of the trial came with clear skies and a hot wind blowing dust through Helena's streets. Eli and Abigail walked to the courthouse together, her hand tight on his arm. A crowd had gathered outside, some curious, some supportive women mostly, who'd heard about the case and came to bear witness. But some were hostile. Men in expensive suits who glared at Abigail like she was something foul they'd stepped in. "Whore," one of them muttered as they passed. Eli stopped, turned. "Say that again." The man, fat and red-faced, sneered. "Everyone knows she was his mistress. Now she wants money. Typical." Eli's fist caught him in the throat. The man went down gasping. 2 other men rushed forward but stopped when they saw Eli's hand on his gun. "Anyone else want to share their opinion?" Eli asked quietly. Silence. "That's what I thought." He guided Abigail past the crowd and into the courthouse. Inside, the air was cooler, but the tension was just as thick. Lawyers in black suits conferred in corners. Reporters scribbled notes. Federal marshals stood guard. A young attorney approached them. "Miss Morgan, Mr. Hawthorne, I'm Daniel Webster. I'll be prosecuting this case." Webster looked too young to be handling something this important. Maybe 25, with earnest eyes and ink-stained fingers. "You're the prosecutor?" Eli asked skeptically. "Yes, sir. I know I look young, but I promise you I take this case seriously." "What happened to Miss Morgan and those other women?" He stopped, emotion flickering across his face. "I'll make sure everyone hears the truth." "How many defendants?" Abigail asked. 5. All business associates of Keller's. We have evidence they knew about his activities, possibly facilitated them. Your testimony will establish the pattern of abuse. Help us prove knowledge and intent. What if they attack my credibility? They will. Defense attorneys have already filed motions claiming you're an unreliable witness, that you consented to your arrangement with Keller, that you're only testifying for financial gain. Webster met her eyes. "I won't lie to you, Miss Morgan. This will be hard. They'll try to tear you apart. But if you can hold steady, if you can tell your truth clearly and honestly, the jury will believe you." "How can you be sure?" "Because truth has a weight to it, a substance. Lies sound hollow next to it. Just tell what happened. Let the truth speak for itself." The bailiff called the court to order. They filed into the courtroom. Eli sat in the gallery while Abigail was led to a side room to wait for her testimony. She looked back at him, once fear naked on her face. He nodded. "You've got this." She took a breath and disappeared through the door. The trial opened with Webster's statement to the jury. He laid out the case methodically. Silas Keller had operated a criminal enterprise for 2 decades, had kidnapped, imprisoned, tortured, and murdered 12 women, had done it with the knowledge and sometimes assistance of the 5 defendants. The defense attorneys objected constantly, claimed hearsay, lack of evidence, prejudicial language. The judge, an older man named Harrison with a hard face and harder eyes, overruled most of them. "This court will hear the truth," he said, "however ugly it may be." Webster called his first witnesses: Sheriff Carson, who described finding the graves; the coroner who testified about the condition of the bodies; a former ranch hand who'd worked for Keller and quit after seeing things that weren't right. Each testimony built the case brick by brick. But the defense tore into them, cast doubt on their memories, questioned their motives, made it sound like Keller had been a respected businessman victimized by wild accusations. By the end of the first day, Eli wasn't sure which way the jury was leaning. That night back at the boarding house, Abigail paced her room. "I testify tomorrow," she said. "I'm not ready." "You'll never be ready, but you're strong enough. That's different. What if I forget something? What if I say the wrong thing? Just tell what happened, simple and true. That's all anyone can ask." She stopped pacing and looked at him. "Will you stay with me tonight? Not like that. Just stay. I don't want to be alone." Eli nodded. They lay on top of the bed, fully clothed, her back pressed against his chest, his arm around her waist. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything, for saving me, for believing me, for loving me. Always." She fell asleep eventually. Eli stayed awake listening to her breathe, praying to a God he wasn't sure he believed in anymore that tomorrow wouldn't break her. Morning came too fast. They ate breakfast in silence. Dressed carefully, Abigail in her best dress, hair pinned back, looking respectable and proper and terrified. At the courthouse, Webster met them outside the courtroom. "Ready?" he asked Abigail. "No, but let's do it anyway." The gallery was packed when they entered. Every seat filled, people standing against the walls, the air hot and close. The 5 defendants sat at the defense table, flanked by expensive lawyers. They looked at Abigail with expressions ranging from contempt to boredom, like she didn't matter, like her suffering was irrelevant. Eli wanted to shoot every one of them. The judge entered. Everyone stood. Court was called to order. Webster stood. "The prosecution calls Abigail Morgan." Abigail rose on shaking legs, walked to the witness stand, placed her hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the truth. Then she sat down and looked at Eli. He nodded. "I'm here. You're not alone." Webster approached gently. "Miss Morgan, can you tell the court your name and age?" "Abigail Morgan. I'm 28 years old." "And where do you currently reside?" "Near Bitter Creek, Montana Territory. On Mr. Hawthorne's land." "Can you tell the court how you came to be on Mr. Hawthorne's land?" Abigail took a breath, let it out slowly. "He saved me. From Silas Keller's barn, where I'd been chained for 6 months." A murmur ran through the courtroom. Webster waited for silence. Then, "Can you tell the court in your own words what happened to you?" And Abigail began to speak. She told them about her family's murder, about wandering lost and alone, about collapsing on Keller's property and waking up in his house. She told them about how he'd been kind at first, how he'd fed her and let her rest, how she'd thought she was safe. She told them about the night he came to her room, about how he'd locked the door, about what he'd said and what he'd tried to do. She told them about fighting back, about the barn, about the chains. Her voice never wavered, never broke. She spoke clearly and simply, laying out horror after horror with the calm of someone who'd already survived the worst and had nothing left to fear. Webster guided her through it, asked specific questions, let her answer fully. The jury listened in shocked silence. Some of them looked sick. One woman was crying. The defendant stared at the table, refusing to meet Abigail's eyes. When Webster finished, the defense attorney stood. A man named Clayton with silver hair and a cruel smile. "Miss Morgan," he began smoothly, "you claim you were held captive. But isn't it true you never tried to escape? I was chained. But during the times you weren't chained, when Mr. Keller brought you food or water, you never ran. He would have caught me, killed me. Or perhaps you didn't run because you didn't want to. Perhaps you were a willing participant in your arrangement with Mr. Keller. No, I was his prisoner. A prisoner he fed, sheltered, kept alive. A prisoner he beat, tortured, raped. Gasps from the gallery. Clayton's smile faltered. You have no proof of these allegations. I have scars. I have nightmares. I have 6 months of hell etched into my memory. That's my proof. Scars can come from anywhere. Nightmares are subjective. Memory is unreliable. My memory is fine. I remember every day, every hour, every time he came into that barn and reminded me I was his property. Property. Interesting word choice. Did Mr. Keller purchase you? He took me, like he took 11 other women before me. 11 women who conveniently cannot testify because they're dead. Convenient for you, maybe. For them, it was murder. Clayton's face reddened. You're here seeking compensation from Mr. Keller's estate, are you not? I'm here to tell the truth. A truth that conveniently makes you a wealthy woman if these charges stick. Abigail stood up. The bailiff moved to stop her, but she ignored him. She walked to the jury box and held up her wrists. The scars were still visible, pale lines where the chains had cut to bone. This is my truth, she said, voice ringing through the courtroom. I don't need money. I need justice. I need those men, she pointed at the defendants, who knew what Keller was doing and did nothing to face consequences. I need the world to know that women are not property, that we matter, that our lives and our suffering and our voices matter. She turned to the judge. I'm done answering questions designed to make me doubt myself. I know what happened to me. I know what I survived. And I know that every person in this room can look at these scars and know I'm telling the truth. The courtroom erupted, people shouting, the defense attorneys objecting, the judge pounding his gavel. Through it all, Abigail stood steady. And when the noise finally died down, Judge Harrison looked at her with something like respect. Miss Morgan, you may step down. She walked back to her seat. Eli met her at the gate, pulled her into his arms, whispered, You were magnificent. I was angry. Same thing sometimes. The trial continued for 2 more days. More witnesses, more evidence, more legal wrangling. But nothing mattered as much as Abigail's testimony. Everyone in that courtroom knew it. On the 3rd day, the jury deliberated for 4 hours. When they returned, the foreman stood. On all counts, we find the defendants guilty. The courtroom exploded with noise, some cheering, some angry, the defendants shouting about appeals and injustice. But Eli only saw Abigail, saw her collapse into her chair, shaking with relief. She'd done it. She'd faced her demons and won. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed them. Abigail answered a few questions, then said, I just want to go home. And they did. 3 days later, they rode back toward Bitter Creek, back toward the cabin in the valley, back toward their life together. Do you think it's really over? Abigail asked as they crested the ridge overlooking their land. The trial's over. The convictions are done. But healing? Eli looked at her. That takes longer. Maybe forever. Forever sounds good, as long as you're there. I'm not going anywhere. They rode down into the valley as the sun set behind the mountains, 2 people who'd found each other in darkness and chosen to walk toward the light together. The past would always be part of them. The scars would always remain. But they had each other, had hope, had tomorrow, and sometimes that was everything. The cabin felt different when they returned. Smaller somehow, like the world outside had expanded, and this little valley couldn't hold them the same way anymore. Abigail stood in the doorway, hand on the frame, not quite stepping inside. What's wrong? Eli asked, setting down their saddlebags. Nothing. Everything. I don't know. She finally crossed the threshold. It's just, we left here and everything made sense. Now we're back and I feel like a different person in the same place. You are a different person. Stronger. Braver. Or more broken. She moved to the window, staring out at the mountains. In that courtroom, I felt powerful. Felt like I mattered. Now I'm back here and it's just quiet. Too quiet. Eli came to stand beside her. Quiet can be good. Gives you space to heal without the world pressing in. Or space to think too much. She turned to face him. Eli, I need to tell you something. The seriousness in her voice made his chest tighten. All right. When I was testifying, when I was standing there telling my story to all those strangers, I realized something. She took a breath. I'm tired of being a victim. Tired of being the woman who survived Silas Keller. I want to be more than that. Want to matter for something other than my suffering. You already are more than that. To you maybe. But out there. She gestured toward the world beyond the valley. Out there, I'm just the captive girl. The one who got rescued. The one everyone pities. What do you want to be instead? She was quiet for a long moment. Then, I want to help. Want to find other women like me. Women trapped, scared, broken, and help them get free. Help them heal. Eli felt something shift in his chest. Pride maybe, or fear. That's dangerous work. Living is dangerous. At least this way the danger means something. Abigail. Don't tell me it's too soon. Don't tell me I need more time to heal. I've had time. Had months of quiet and peace and safety, and I'm grateful for it. But I can't just sit here knowing there are other women going through what I went through. You can't save everyone. I can try, the way you tried to save me. She took his hands. Eli, you gave me my life back. Let me use it for something that matters. He wanted to argue, wanted to keep her safe here in their valley, where nothing could hurt her. But he saw the determination in her eyes, the fire that had been building since the trial. How would it work? He asked finally. I don't know yet, but Martha Reeves knows people, knows women who've escaped bad situations. Maybe we start there. Offer shelter, resources, a place to heal. Here, why not? We've got land, space. We could build another cabin, create a safe house. And the men who come looking for their property, because that's how they'll see it, as stealing their property. Then we'll be ready for them. She squeezed his hands. I'm not naive, Eli. I know what this means, know the risks. But I also know I can't go back to just living a quiet life, not anymore. Eli looked at her, this woman who'd been broken and rebuilt herself into something stronger than before. This woman who loved him despite all his failures. This woman who wanted to turn her pain into purpose. All right, he said. We'll do it. But we do it smart. We plan. We prepare. We make sure we can protect anyone who comes here. Abigail's face lit up with a smile that made all his concerns worth it. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. This is going to be hard, dangerous. People are going to hate us. Good, let them hate us. As long as we're saving lives, I don't care. They started planning that night, sketched out ideas by candlelight, talked about how to fund it, how to spread the word, how to keep it safe. By dawn, they had the beginnings of something real, something that might change everything. 2 weeks later, Martha Reeves rode up to the cabin with a woman riding double behind her. The woman was young, maybe 19, with a black eye and a split lip. She wore a dress that had been torn and hastily mended. Her hands shook as Martha helped her down from the horse. This is Emma, Martha said quietly. Her husband. Well, he's got a temper. Been beating her for months. Last night he came at her with a knife. She ran. Emma stared at the ground, shame written in every line of her body. Abigail stepped forward. Emma, I'm Abigail. You're safe here. No one's going to hurt you. Emma looked up with eyes full of fear and desperate hope. He'll come for me. He always finds me. Let him come. He'll regret it. Eli showed Emma to the spare room they'd prepared. Simple but clean, safe. A place where locked doors meant protection instead of imprisonment. After Emma settled, Martha pulled Eli and Abigail aside. Her husband's name is Thomas Reed. Works at the sawmill in town. Mean drunk. Dangerous when he's angry. She paused. He will come looking for her. You need to be ready. We're ready, Eli said. Are you? Because this isn't like Keller? Reed's not working alone. He's got brothers, friends, men who think a wife's a man's property to do with as he pleases. Then they'll learn different. Martha looked between them. You know what you're starting here. You're not just saving one woman. You're challenging the whole system. Every man who thinks he owns his wife. Every father who sells his daughter. Every law that treats women like property. You make enemies doing that. I've had worse enemies, Abigail said. Have you? Because Keller was one monster. This is a whole society of them, all protecting each other, all agreeing you're wrong. Doesn't make them right. Martha sighed. Just be careful, both of you. What you're doing is brave, but bravery gets people killed. After Martha left, Eli checked his weapons, cleaned and loaded every gun, sharpened his knives, prepared like he was going to war, because he was. Thomas Reed came 3 days later. Eli heard the horses before he saw them. 4 riders coming fast up the valley trail. He grabbed his rifle and stepped onto the porch. Abigail came out behind him, her own pistol strapped to her hip. Stay inside with Emma, Eli said. No, we face this together. The riders reined in 30 yards from the cabin. Thomas Reed sat in front, a big man with a thick beard and cold eyes. His brothers flanked him. The 4th man Eli didn't recognize. I'm here for my wife, Reed called out. She's not your wife anymore, Abigail replied. She left you. She can't leave. She's mine. Till death do us part, remember? Those vows don't include you beating her half to death. Reed's face darkened. What happens between a man and his wife ain't your business. It is when she comes to us bleeding and scared. She's coming with me, now. Eli raised his rifle. No, she's not. The brothers reached for their guns. Eli's rifle tracked to them. I wouldn't. I'm a dead shot and I've got nothing to lose. You'll be dead before you clear leather. Reed held up a hand. His brothers froze. You're making a mistake, Hawthorne. You're harboring my property. That's theft. She's not property. She's a person, and she's staying here. The law says, I don't care what the law says, she's not going back to you. Reed's smile turned cruel. Then I'll get the law. I'll get the sheriff. He'll drag her out of there in chains, and you'll hang for interfering. Sheriff Carson's a friend. Try him. See what happens. Reed's smile faltered. He hadn't expected resistance. Hadn't expected anyone to stand up to him. This ain't over, he said finally. Yes, it is. Ride away while you still can. For a long moment, Reed just stared. Then he yanked his horse around and rode off, his brothers following. The 4th man lingered. He looked at Abigail with something like respect. Good on you, he said quietly. Then he followed the others. When they were gone, Abigail lowered her gun. Her hands were shaking. He'll be back, she said. Probably. But we held the line today. That's what matters. Inside, Emma was crying with relief. Thank you. Thank you. I thought he'd take me. No one's taking you, Abigail said firmly. You're free now, and you're going to stay that way. But Reed didn't give up. He came back with the sheriff, not Carson, but a deputy named Willis, who believed a man's home was his castle, and a wife's place was in it. Willis rode up with a legal writ demanding Emma be returned to her husband. Eli read it, then handed it back. This isn't legal. Judge Harrison himself said at the Keller trial that a person can't be held against their will. That applies here. That was different. That was about kidnapping. So is this. Reed kidnapped Emma's freedom. We're giving it back. Willis shifted uncomfortably. Look, Hawthorne, I don't want trouble, But the law's the law. She's his wife. She has to go back. And if she doesn't want to, doesn't matter what she wants. She took vows. Abigail stepped forward. Those vows included to love and to cherish. He broke them when he beat her. That makes the contract void. That's not how it works, ma'am. Then how it works is wrong. Willis looked between them. Young guy, maybe 25. Not a bad person. Just someone who'd never questioned the rules. Please, Abigail said softer now. Just talk to her. Look at her face. Look at what he did. And then tell me she belongs with him. Willis hesitated, then nodded. They brought Emma out. She stood on the porch, bruises, still visible, fear written in her eyes. Mrs. Reed, Willis said carefully, your husband says you ran away, says you need to come home. I can't. Her voice trembled. He'll kill me next time. He says he was drunk, says he's sorry, says it won't happen again. He said that before, every time, and every time it gets worse. Willis looked at her bruises, at the fear in her eyes. Something shifted in his face. Ma'am, if you testify that he hurt you, I can arrest him. Put him in jail. For how long? Few months maybe. And then he gets out, and he comes for me, and no one can stop him. Willis had no answer for that. Finally, he said, I can't force you to go back, but I can't protect you if you don't testify either. I'm not going back. I'd rather die. Willis looked at Eli and Abigail. You know what you're doing? You're making yourselves targets. We know, Eli said. Reed's not going to let this go. Neither are his friends. Let them come. Willis shook his head, climbed back on his horse. When this goes bad, and it will go bad, don't say I didn't warn you. He rode away. Emma collapsed on the steps, sobbing. Abigail sat beside her, arms around her, letting her cry it out. Eli stood guard rifle in hand, watching the trail, waiting for the next attack. It came at midnight. Eli woke to the smell of smoke, rolled out of bed, grabbed his gun, ran outside. The barn was on fire, flames reaching toward the sky, crackling and roaring. The horses screamed inside. Eli ran toward it, but Abigail grabbed his arm. It's too late. The whole thing's going up. The horses are already gone. Look. She was right. The barn doors stood open. The horses were scattered across the meadow, safe but terrified. Someone had let them out before setting the fire. It's a message, Abigail said. Next time they'll burn the house, with us in it. Eli's jaw clenched. Then we make sure there's no next time. They spent the rest of the night putting out the fire and calming the horses. By dawn, the barn was just smoking ruins. Emma stood in the doorway of the cabin, wrapped in a blanket, guilt written all over her face. This is my fault, she said. You should let me go back, before someone gets killed. No, Abigail said firmly. This is exactly why we're doing this. Because men like Thomas Reed think they can terrorize and control and face no consequences. We don't give in to that. But your barn can be rebuilt. Your life can't. You're staying. Word spread after the fire. Other women heard about what Eli and Abigail were doing. Some came seeking shelter. Others came offering help. Within 2 months, they had 5 women living on the property. Within 4 months, 8. They built new cabins, planted bigger gardens, organized shifts for cooking, cleaning, guard duty. It became a community, a refuge, a place where broken women came to rebuild themselves. But the threats continued. Men showed up demanding their wives back. Some left when faced with armed resistance. Others had to be physically removed. Twice, shots were fired. Once Eli took a bullet in the shoulder. Another time, one of the women, a fierce mother of 3 named Sarah, shot a man trying to break into her cabin. The law turned a blind eye. Too many powerful men were embarrassed by the safe house. Too many wanted it gone. Then Federal Marshal James Bridger came to visit. Eli had met Bridger before during the Keller trial, respected him. The marshal was in his 50s, gray-haired and hard-eyed but fair. They sat on the porch while Bridger surveyed the property. "You've built something here," he said. "We're trying to. You're also making enemies, powerful ones. I know. Do you? Because I've got 3 formal complaints on my desk. Men accusing you of kidnapping, theft, armed assault. They want you arrested. For what? Giving shelter to women who ask for it. For interfering with legal marriages. For harboring fugitives. For threatening citizens with deadly force. Those citizens came here armed. We defended ourselves." Bridger was quiet for a moment. Then, "I believe you. But belief doesn't matter if I can't prove it. And right now it's your word against a dozen respectable men." "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying, tread carefully, get witnesses, document everything. Make sure every woman here signs a statement saying she came willingly. Build a legal case that can't be torn apart. And in the meantime, watch your back. These men are getting desperate. Desperate men do stupid things." Bridger stood to leave, then paused. "For what it's worth, Hawthorne, I think what you're doing is right. But right doesn't always win. Sometimes it just gets you killed." After he left, Abigail said, "He's trying to help." "I know. But he's also warning us we're running out of time. Then we use the time we have, save as many as we can. And when they come for us, when they bring enough men and enough guns, that we can't hold them off." Abigail looked at him with eyes that had seen the worst humanity had to offer, and still chose hope. "Then we go down fighting. But we don't stop. We can't stop, because the moment we stop, the moment we give up, all those women lose hope, and hope's the only thing keeping some of them alive." Eli pulled her close. "I don't want to lose you." "You won't. We're stronger together than anything they can throw at us." "I hope you're right. I have to be, because the alternative is unthinkable." The final confrontation came on a cold November morning, almost a year after Emma first arrived. Eli was chopping wood when he saw them coming. Not 4 riders this time. Not 10. 20. Maybe more. An army of angry men, armed and determined. Thomas Reed led them. Behind him rode his brothers, his friends, other husbands whose wives had fled to the safe house. Behind them came men who just wanted to see the troublemakers dealt with. Eli dropped the axe and ran for the house. "Abigail, get everyone inside now." The women scattered, grabbing children, running for the cabins. Eli distributed weapons, rifles, pistols, even kitchen knives, anything that could be used to defend. "We can't fight that many," Sarah said, voice shaking. "We don't have to win," Eli replied. "We just have to hold until help arrives." "What help?" "Good question." Eli had sent word to Marshal Bridger, but Helena was 2 days away. Sheriff Carson was sympathetic, but had no authority outside Bitter Creek. They were on their own. Abigail loaded her rifle with steady hands. "Everyone stay calm, stay inside. Don't shoot unless they come at us first." The riders stopped 50 yards from the main cabin. Thomas Reed dismounted and walked forward. "Last chance, Hawthorne, send out our wives or we take them." Eli stepped onto the porch. "They're not your wives anymore. They left you, it's done." "Nothing's done till we say it's done. Those women belong to us." "Women don't belong to anyone." Reed's face twisted with rage. "Then you've made your choice." He turned to his men. "Burn them out." Half the men dismounted and moved toward the cabins with torches. Eli fired a warning shot over their heads. "Stop right there, or the next one goes through you." The men hesitated, looked at Reed. Reed pulled his gun. "I said burn them out." Then a voice boomed across the valley. "Federal Marshal, drop your weapons." Everyone turned. Marshal Bridger rode over the ridge with 30 armed men behind him. Not just Marshall's regular men from Bitter Creek and surrounding towns. Men who'd heard what was happening and decided to help. Mrs. Fletcher was there. Sheriff Carson. the young prosecutor, Daniel Webster. Even Jacob Keller rode with them, face grim with determination. They spread out in a line between the mob and the cabins. Bridger dismounted, hand on his gun. "Thomas Reed, you and your associates are under arrest for conspiracy to commit arson, assault with deadly weapons, and attempted murder. You can't arrest us. We're getting our property back. Those women aren't property, and you're going to jail." Reed looked around desperately. His men were already backing down, outnumbered and outgunned. "This is wrong," Reed said. "The law's on our side." "The law's on the side of justice," Bridger replied. "And there's no justice in what you were about to do." They arrested Reed and 5 others. The rest scattered. When it was over, Abigail stood on the porch with Eli beside her, watching the sunset over the valley. "We won," she said quietly. "For now. That's all we ever get. For now. One day at a time. One woman at a time." Emma came out to stand with them. Behind her, the other women emerged from the cabins, wary but hopeful. "Thank you," Emma said, "for not giving up on us." "We'll never give up," Abigail replied. "That's a promise." Marshal Bridger approached, hat in hand. "You made a lot of enemies today." "And a lot of friends, looks like," Eli said, gesturing to the men who'd ridden with Bridger. "True, but this isn't over. Men like Reed have connections, money. They'll appeal, they'll sue, they'll try every legal trick to shut you down. Let them try. We're not going anywhere." Bridger smiled. "I believe you. And for what it's worth, I'll do everything I can to help. What you're building here, it matters." After everyone left, Eli and Abigail sat on the porch in the gathering darkness. "We should get married," Eli said suddenly. Abigail turned to him, surprised. "What?" "Married. Properly. With a preacher and witnesses and all of it. Not because we have to. Because I want to. Because I want everyone to know you're my partner. My equal. My choice." Eli Hawthorne, was that a proposal? A terrible one. But yes. She laughed. Actually laughed, bright and clear and full of joy. "Then yes, I'll marry you." They married in the spring, surrounded by the women they'd saved and the people who'd helped them. It was small and simple and perfect. Pastor Williams performed the ceremony. Mrs. Fletcher cried. The women from the safe house threw wildflowers. And when Eli kissed his bride, it felt like a new beginning, not an end to the past. The scars would always be there. The nightmares would never completely fade. But they had each other, had purpose, had a home filled with people healing together. 5 years later, the safe house was still operating. They'd helped over 100 women escape bad situations. Some stayed. Some moved on to build new lives elsewhere. Abigail ran the place with fierce efficiency. She'd become a force to be reckoned with, respected and feared in equal measure. Eli practiced medicine again. Treated the women and their children. Delivered babies. Healed wounds, both physical and emotional. They had 2 children of their own, a daughter named Mary Emma and a son named Samuel. Both grew up surrounded by strong women and learned early that everyone deserved respect and kindness. On a warm summer evening, Eli found Abigail sitting by the creek, watching the water flow past. "Thinking about the past?" he asked, sitting beside her. "Thinking about how far we've come. About how that day in the barn changed everything. Do you regret it? Any of it? The suffering?" "Yes. What Keller did to me and all those other women, that'll always be a regret." She took his hand. "But meeting you, building this, helping all these women find freedom, no. I don't regret any of that. I'm proud of you. Of what you've become. I'm proud of us. We did this together." Eli looked at their land, at the cabins scattered across the valley, at the women working in the gardens and laughing with their children. Looked at the life they'd built from ashes and pain and determination. "We saved each other," he said. "Yeah," Abigail replied, leaning against him. "We did." And in that moment, sitting by the creek with the woman he loved, surrounded by the community they'd created, Elijah Hawthorne finally understood what it meant to be whole. Not perfect, not without scars, but whole. The chains were broken. The darkness had lifted. The future stretched out before them like an open road, and they walked it together, two people who'd survived hell, and chosen not just to live, but to make sure others could live too. Because sometimes salvation doesn't come from grand gestures or perfect heroes. Sometimes it comes from one person saying to another, "I see you. I believe you. You're not alone." And that was enough. That would always be enough.